Welcome to the Libertarian Institute Odyssey and YouTube channel. Today, we are going to be discussing a number of books that the Libertarian Institute has put out, along with going through our collection of archive. We have the Grigg archive, the Oklahoma City archive. My name is Keith Knight. I'm managing editor at the Libertarian Institute. Joining me is Scott Horton, the director of the Libertarian Institute. Scott, thanks for taking the time today.
Hey, happy to be here with you, Keith. How are you?
I am doing fine. Glad we all got to get together. Scott, a lot of people are not familiar with William Norman Gregg and his archive that we do have provided for people. What is something that William Gregg provided that has gone underappreciated in the freedom movement?
Oh, well, everything he ever wrote, unfortunately, which is not to say that it was unappreciated. It's just it would be impossible for it to be appreciated as much as it deserves to be. Will Grigg was really our brightest and most eloquent speaker and writer in the libertarian movement. He was the former editor of the John Birch Society's magazine, The New American, and had been, a bit more of a kind of a right patriot, populist movement conspiracist type in the 1990s. And then in the Bush years, like a lot of libertarians and kind of right-leaning anti-government types, he just got really good, and he just stayed that way. And Birchers got rid of him because he wouldn't support their police state on the border, which was a big fad in 2006, led by Lou Dobbs on CNN and all of that. And they figured that would be a good moneymaker to be a position for them to take, and would sacrifice their principles for those dollars. And so they showed him the door since he wouldn't go along with that, which was fine by me because, frankly, that was always just a terrible brand name to be stuck to the name William Norman Gregg. Even though, John Birch was just a missionary who was murdered by some Chinese communists. And this guy, Robert Welch, named his society after the guy. And Robert Welch has been dead for, I don't know, forever. And, the Birchers in general, the population, I don't know about all their leadership and everyone who ever wrote for them, although they have some great guys who have written for them in the past for sure. But their membership are basically good American Christian constitutionalist conservative types. People kind of portray them as very, very far right and racist and that kind of thing. That was never my experience with them. They're certainly conservative on social issues, but so were a lot of people. But they were not like so far to the right that they ever advocated anything negative along those lines or anything like that. But anyway, once he was free of them and their reputation, then he just got so good. And the only negative thing I could say, Keith, was that he became so good on writing about the police state and writing about, domestic American policing and bad trials, innocent people in prison and violent police raids on innocent family homes and these things. He was just the best in the world at that. But it was at the expense of him writing about every other thing. And he really was such a brilliant genius. He could comment on just anything under the sun. And I swear to God, like, this is a guy, and I've known other people like this in my life. There's such a thing as this. It's just, there's people like this who just have absolute instant recall of every vocabulary word they've ever learned in any context. And this guy just had a vocabulary 100 times the size of any of the rest of us. He's just brilliant. And he knew everything about the history of everything that just ever happened. So you could say, man, this thing going on right now in Ramadi is so concerning for the following reasons. And he would go, this is just like the Battle of Warsaw in 1121. And then he'd tell you about some ancient battle in the context of the thing. And it's a perfect analogy. Of course, it fits perfectly. He's not just bragging. He just came up with that because it's actually the best metaphor to use in this example. Or what? He's just brilliant. He's as brilliant as anybody could be. And so then, I'm very proud to say that he was a founding member of the Libertarian Institute. It was me and him and Sheldon Richmond were the original three that founded the thing. And then, I regret to say he died only about half a year later in the spring. In fact, what's the date?
Today's April 11th.
Tomorrow is the anniversary of his death, Keith.
Oy vey. Rest in peace.
Yeah. He died. He's 52 years old. And it's just, it's a crime, first and foremost, against his family, of course, that he died at such a young age. But for all of us, it's just, that whole thing. I guess I always think this whenever anybody dies, I guess, they're like, it ain't fair that their brain got turned off permanently just because their body couldn't hack it anymore for whatever reason. You know, like that sucks. Here's this guy who's got the most brilliant brain ever that somehow ought to have lasted forever. And now it's just gone. You can't replicate that shit with a computer, right? There's just no such thing as Will Grigg ever again. It sucks. It's such a loss. It's just unbelievable. It's the same with Justin, except Justin was such a prickly jerk. He wouldn't even mind me saying so. But Will Grigg was just the most decent and kindest man. Sucks. Anyway, we published a book of his after he died called No Quarter, which is a collection of his writings from, I'm pretty sure, I guess, 2001 on. And it's just the best it's so great. I mean, I couldn't say enough about it. I mean, my warning, I guess, is that it'll ruin you. It's the most horrible thing. The stuff that he writes about in there, about what our government does to people, it is just incredible and just astounding. Like you never seen anything like it before, and for the right wingers and the thin blue line, flag wavers in your life, this is the solution to their problem. You could take, that guy that goes around, there's more than one, but there's the guy who's really famous for going around training cops that they should kill anyone at a moment's notice because your life is on the line and they're 7 feet away. They can kill you in one instant. So you should just blow them away first and all these things. I bet you can make an anarchist out of that guy if somehow you could make him read this book. This is the thing. You know how you sometimes read a book and you go, man, if only everyone was reading the same thing as me right now, we'd live in a different world tomorrow. This is like that. It's really one of those. It's the greatest thing ever. I'm sorry. You shouldn't ask me such a broad question. I don't remember what it was. Something about him. I like Will Grigg. I like Will Grigg so much, man.
I was just asking about his contributions. What I love about the book is he really brings to life the anger that you should have. So if you've
and one more thing, I'm sorry, Keith, before I forget, because I will forget it. But we have his entire archive. We collected PDFs of his newspaper articles from 1990. We got as much as we could ever salvage from the John Birch Society site, and everything he ever wrote at his blog Pro Libertate. Plus we have 2 or 3 different versions of his radio show, the Liberty Minute and whatever all it was. I forgot it all now. But it's all there in the Will Grigg archive on the right-hand margin there. Like everything. As far as I know, it's everything he ever wrote that we could get our hands on, which is virtually everything. Anybody listening to this who's a Will Grigg fan who has something you think we may have missed, Scott at scotthorton.org, and please let me have it. But anyway, I'm sorry to interrupt you. I lose my train of thought so quickly. If I didn't say that, I might have not remembered again.
Of course. Yeah, Will Grigg is the best previously living example of attacking the right from the right. This is where I got the idea to go on a show in Tucson, Arizona, and go through the points of Thomas Aquinas as far as whether or not America should get involved in the war in Ukraine, let alone Syria and many other nations. You're taking their own principles and applying them consistently. Another thing that I love about this one is that if you've intellectually come to the idea that, yes, the non-aggression principle is legitimate, you don't really get angry until you see how much evil it really plays in your everyday life, the trauma that state enforcers cause. You might think of cops as sort of passively just enacting government edicts, but it's so much more than that. And Will Grigg really brings that to life.
Absolutely. And by the way, let me say real quick here too that from the very beginning, man, he was so perfect on the war on terrorism. And the New American Magazine, the first issue of the New American Magazine after September 11th was just about how much we love cops and firefighters. What heroes, right? That was it. That was the whole issue. The next one was about the history of Al-Qaeda and Egyptian Islamic Jihad terrorism in the United States, the first World Trade Center attack, and all the things leading up to September 11th, Khobar, and all the rest, and asking the question, the very second issue and the third issue too, could we have prevented the attack? How could the CIA and State Department have let these men into the country? How could the FBI not have buttoned them up? That was in the first and the second, the second and third issues after September 11th. And he's the one, you hear me quote this all the time, that that it's Will Grigg quoting Saul Alinsky. And this is long before Obama made Alinsky famous, when years later. He quotes Saul Alinsky, page 75 of Rules for Radicals, that in asymmetric political action, including terrorism, the action is in the reaction of the opposition. So put yourself in the shoes of bin Laden and his handful of bandits. How the hell are they going to take on the United States of America? USA, #1 world superpower, yellow ribbon and all. Well, the answer is get us to blow our own brains out. Give our government an opportunity to exploit to the ends of the earth till our empire completely buries itself in the graveyards of Afghanistan. That's what it's all about. They're trying to jerk our chain. They're trying to get something stupid. Will Grigg wrote that in the New American Magazine in November 2001. And you just mentioned St. Thomas is what reminded me of this. Is he went right there in the I'm saying it's the second or the third issue, probably the second issue, after September 11th. He went through the just war theory. There's 14 planks of the just war theory, and you can't have a war unless you got all 14. And he said we flunk here on like 6 things. There's no way you could justify invading Afghanistan. Now, again, this is the John Birch Society's magazine, and whatever you think about them, there's just and their beliefs about whatever issues. There's just no question. These are the most George Washingtonian, red, white, and blue, Republican, American, patriot, conservative, military veteran types in the country. Okay? There's just nothing, even if you don't like their patriotism, even, you're like a liberal Democrat and you just despise even the name. You probably don't know anything about them, but anyway, despise the name. You still can't deny they believe they're patriots. They love George Washington for real. They're dedicated to the Constitution, like in the oath they took to it. So many of them being veterans of the Army and that kind of thing. Unlike other federal government employees, don't give a damn about that. Veterans really do care about stuff like that. So the fact that they were saying, nope, we're anti-war, 3,000 killed, surprise attack, our military command headquarters hit, that still is not enough to justify war. You have to show me that you have no other option. Because St. Thomas says otherwise, God wouldn't stand for it. And that's in November of 01. Which, if, God, was all that so instructive for me. And I was so grateful that I already knew about him and read him and all of that stuff at the time. But boy, does it also go to show no one else had any excuse at all. Here are the most conservative patriots in America, but instead of acting like little crybabies and throwing a temper tantrum, they acted like grown-ups, and they thought this through. They knew what they were talking about, and they made the right choices. Let's hear all the people who say the Birchers are the worst people in the world confront that issue, that they were right about the last 20 years before it started, and they stayed good on it the whole time. Where were all these people? Hell, you had, 2/3 of Democrat voters of America support George Bush's aggressive war in Iraq. But the John Birchers knew better. So, I hope people have fun living with that. But anyway, Will Grigg was the very best one of us ever. Now I'll be quiet. Thank you.
For $25 in a donation, you can pick up a digital copy of any of our books. For $50, you can get a physical copy. For a $100 donation, you can get a physical copy of any of our books and your own Libertarian Institute mug. Great conversation starters. Also joining us is Editor-in-Chief Sheldon Richmond. Sheldon, tell us about your book, which people can also get a digital copy of, Coming to Palestine.
Well, thank you. Nice to be here. Good to see you all. Coming to Palestine is a collection of articles I'd written over the last 30 years, from the late 80s. It appeared in various publications that examine the violence and dispute and controversy involving the Israelis, the foundation of the State of Israel, and the Palestinian people, the people who had been living there long before the Zionist movement got started in the late 19th century, and then culminating in 1948 with the Declaration of Independence by the Zionists, who then declared that the state of Israel now existed. And I try to take a close look at it from, obviously from a libertarian perspective, which is how I would be expected to look at things. And the thing I argue is that the Palestinians are overwhelmingly the aggrieved party. They had lived in that territory between the Mediterranean Sea and the Jordan River for 1,000 or years more. They're descended from people from people who lived there during biblical times, and the Zionist movement is a relatively late development, namely in the late 19th century, and then where land then started to be acquired, some through sales, but a very small percentage of the land acquired through sales. And then once we get into the 40s, you have paramilitary groups on the Zionist side, which actually drive Palestinians off their land and out of Palestine or to some other part of Palestine. The result is what we have today, which is human rights group unanimously regarded as an apartheid state, where Palestinians who are living within territory controlled by the state of Israel are not equal rights. They range from third-class citizens to non-citizens, depending on what part of the country and the territories we're talking about.
This is so important because it's one of the myths that I was certainly taught many moons ago, that the Palestinians more or less voluntarily left the land, knowing that Arab countries would come in response, push the Jews into the sea, and then they would have this land for the rest of them. And also it had something to do with the UN legitimately forming a state in Israel. So many important myths in this book coming to Palestine that Richmond goes over. Such a valuable contribution here. Also, go over your book, if you can, What Social Animals Owe to Each Other, another one that people can buy from the Libertarian Institute for a $25 donation.
Well, that's also a collection of articles I have mostly, I think, written under the TGIF, the Goal is Freedom title. It was a Friday article that I started when I was editor of the Freeman magazine for 15 years, up until about, I don't know, what was it, 2013 or 14. And so it hits a lot of different topics, but I guess broadly we can just say it's a book of libertarian political philosophy, some ethics thrown in, history, and What Social Animals Owe to Each Other is actually the name of an essay in there. So I like that title. And I think it does unite all of them, so I use that as the title. But I'm just trying to give my take on why the libertarian philosophy is the correct one, why it leads to a prosperous and free society, why it's the best situation in which human beings or social animals can flourish. It's influenced by lots of different people. Aristotle, I mean, I can go way back to ancient times, but Aristotle, and then lots of people coming up through time, Locke, heavily Mises, Ayn Rand, contemporarily, Roderick Long has been very important in, I think, developing this view and putting various pieces together: Austrian economics, natural law, natural rights, philosophy, a few other parts, theories of knowledge, all of which kind of fit together and present a coherent case for individual liberty. So I think that kind of ties together all the varying sub-themes that this book covers.
Joining me is Kyle Anzalone, the news editor of the Libertarian Institute. Kyle, do you have a favorite book that the Institute, well, I hate to ask you to pick favorites, but as far as books we haven't mentioned, what is another one that you enjoy?
Enough Already. I mean, both of Scott's books, Fool's Errand and Enough Already, as people can see on my top shelf here, are just really, really fantastic books. But Enough Already is a little less intimidating for people. So that's a book like when I give it to somebody, they tend to get back to me and tell me they read it and really enjoyed it. And so, yeah, I really like that book a lot. Just not that, when I read it, because I had, talked to Scott about it, leading up to it, and read a couple drafts, that I was like, learned a whole bunch of stuff, but just how accessible everybody else finds this book is so important. And so I really do like Enough Already quite a bit. But Fool's Errand is also fantastic, and that's a book where I reread it a couple months ago, or I guess more than a couple months ago now, around the after the fall of the Afghan government, and I'm still picking up stuff in that book because Scott crammed so much knowledge into there, and there's so much important stuff, and it's all footnoted so well, so you could go through and confirm it if you want to learn a little bit more. It's so easy to do from Fool's Errand, but Scott's books are absolutely great.
And also we have the Raimondo Fellow at the Libertarian Institute, Patrick McFarland. Patrick, what is one of your favorite things that the Institute has to offer?
Oh, well, I mean, I love the books, but I also love the news coverage that Kyle Anzalone and Will Porter are doing over there. Just fantastic stuff. I mean, if you want to know what's going on, they've been busting their fingers to the bone, just trying to report on things that are breaking in Ukraine, and there's been great China coverage and things going on across the world. So I really think that is invaluable, and it's a great accompaniment to the work that Dave DeCamp is doing at antiwar.com.
One of the things I really like is this concept of a news roundup. It is probably the most efficient use of your time. Kyle will just set these. Russia, here's what's going on in that area. China, Korea, the Middle East. I mean, heavens, you don't have to watch Don Lemon for 42 minutes every night to get informed on what is going on. Sheldon, is there anything you could tell us about the founding of the Institute with Scott and Will that you think people would find of interest?
I was living in California at the time. I had been working for the Future Freedom Foundation, and the funding came to an end, and so I had a chance to save on some money because a friend of mine was willing to put me up in an apartment. So we moved to California. Ended up being a year and a half. When I went, I didn't know how long it was going to be, and I was in beautiful San Diego County, northern county, where the weather, of course, is basically perfect every day, and spending a lot of time just sitting outside on the patio there with my laptop or reading, and writing columns for my own blog, which I've had since 2005, called Free Association. And I guess the best I can reconstruct it is I got a call from Scott. I knew I'd been on his show before, and of course I knew Anti-War, and some of my stuff had appeared at Anti-War. And again, best as I can recall, he was saying things like, "We need to do something. We need to start an organization." And I said, "Okay, sounds good to me." I didn't have a full-time job. I said, "Sounds good to me." And then before I know it, he brings Will Grigg in on it, and we're having these three-way calls. I still remember the scene. It was gorgeous weather. I could sit outside, smoke my pipe, smoke a cigar, and talk. Just kick this idea around. And at first, I wondered, is it really going to go anywhere? We're talking. That's great, but Scott's like a dynamo. There's no stopping him when he gets an idea, which is a good thing. And he kept the conversation going, and we kicked the name around, and I don't remember that we came up with. Scott probably came up with it. I don't know. Scott may be able to correct me here. Libertarian Institute, and before I knew it, things were happening. He enlisted somebody to do a decent website, and just one thing or another. We were talking about what books we could do, and I said, I have collections of stuff that we could, kind of turn around fairly quickly. He was the guy who pushed the Palestine book. I guess I really wouldn't have thought of that, and I'm glad he pushed me on that. I don't know, like I say, the rest was history, but I hope there's a huge history in front of us too.
Today, if you donate, we have matching funds for every dollar for the next 20,000. So get yourself a mug or one of these excellent books, help out the Libertarian Institute. It is tax deductible. So I know it's very tempting to send money to the lying, mass murdering government, but if you want to write it off and get a book instead, that does seem like a more efficient allocation of funds. Scott, tell us about this book that people can get, Ron Paul, The Interviews.
Oh yeah, well, man, I'm so proud of that, and well, just any association that I have with the great Dr. Paul, who I really do believe is the greatest American hero ever. I don't know. I guess I could think of a couple skateboarders that come close, but this is Ron Paul. What can you say? And I've been lucky enough to interview him about 30 times, something like that. I ought to have him back on the show soon. It's been a little while. But since about 2004, so mostly we talk about the war on terrorism in there, that kind of thing. But that's what it is. It's transcripts of about 30 interviews of Dr. Paul. And you just get to see how right about everything he was all along. See the excitement of the Ron Paul revolution of 08 and 09, talking a little bit about that. And, yeah, it's really great. He is the great Ron Paul. That's why I called it that. What else is I going to call it, you know?
Kyle, when it comes to other things that the Institute has to offer, books, podcasts, articles, what is something that you have been working on, any research focus that you've had that you think people will find of interest?
I mean, I've just been working on cranking out news articles. The past two that I wrote have actually been on Pakistan. The former now Prime Minister Imran Khan was just removed by the parliament. But before he went out, he claimed that the U.S. was behind the regime change effort. And he really doesn't have any evidence to prove that. But just circumstantially, he has refused an invitation to Biden's Summit for Democracy and claimed that Biden was trying to divide the world into Cold War blocs, and Pakistan wouldn't go along with it. Of course, Pakistan has a very important relationship with China, and so that I'm sure has a lot to do with all of this. But the U.S. was trying to force Pakistan to pick a side, and Imran Khan was going to sit on the fence, and now he's no longer in power. Recently, Pakistan refused to vote against Russia and condemn the invasion of Ukraine at the UN, and also refused to vote to remove Russia from the Human Rights Council, so further upsetting the U.S. The new guy that's coming in, Sharif, is the younger brother of a former leader and the three-time prime minister of Pakistan. And more importantly, he was arrested and charged with money laundering during the Imran Khan administration. I haven't had a chance to dig into too much how much legitimacy there is there, but he does seem like, he's in a very powerful family in the Pakistan, political structure. And so just knowing how governments operate, I wouldn't be surprised that there isn't some legitimacy to that. Protests have broken out in support of Khan. He has a lot of support among particularly the male youth. He was a famous cricket player. I don't think he was like a long-term politician or anything like that before becoming prime minister. And so protests have broken out. There's been some blockades and barricades set up around Pakistan, and we'll see how this unfolds in the coming days.
Patrick McFarland, you have been committing numerous thought crimes when it comes to the Uyghur genocide. Give us an idea of your research approach to what's going on in China.
Well, it's really hard because you have to be incredibly careful when you talk about this topic. And we're really kind of caught between a rock and a hard place, because either we have to believe the lying, murdering U.S. State Department, or we have to believe the Chinese Communist Party. So it's really hard to kind of get down to what the truth is. And in some ways, we can't really say what the truth is. And what we really have to do is view this based on a legal framework. And I'm a lawyer by practice. So trying to see if those accusing the Chinese Communist Party of genocide have been able to meet their burden of proof. And of course, burden of proof is a topic that we talk about in the law, but this is fundamental to this idea of due process, which is the cornerstone of the Western legal theory, and I would say Western society in general. So when you're analyzing this, you really have to play kind of the role of jury to see what's being offered as proof, to evaluate that, to look at credibility, and to see motive to lie, and bias, and see where this information is coming from, and try to audit that information.
Sheldon, when it comes to the idea of libertarianism and government, we sort of have two competing theories here. One theory says that we need a very powerful state to stop a war of all against all. And then there is another concept that says the state is the health of war and war is the health of the state. If I'm someone who just wants order in my life and I'm sick of all the wars, why should I consider libertarianism as opposed to a big state intervention to keep us protected from other wars coming awry?
Well, the answer is that if you're going to give all the guns to this sovereign, to use Hobbes's the name he used for this monopoly on force, and your war of all against all, of course, comes from Hobbes and his book, The Leviathan. You're completely vulnerable now to the theoretical goodwill of the sovereign, who's again in theory is supposed to just preserve order so that people can otherwise go about their business. But Hobbes's idea was to give total power to this so-called peacekeeper. And that hasn't worked out very well in history. States, for different reasons, public choice reasons, Austrian knowledge problem reasons, just simply reasons of immorality, states take advantage of this highly privileged position, the people in the state. I mean, the state is as a group of people. Let's remember, it's not some mystical entity. Those individuals then take advantage of it. First of all, they're living off the industrious people, the people that actually work, and they reap the benefits of that. And now they don't want outsiders to come in and muscle in on their golden goose. So they'll provide some defense services in that regard. So they'll protect you from outside invaders because they don't want the outside invaders to kick out the sovereign and become the new sovereign. They don't want to lose their position. So that what looks like certain services provided, have an ulterior motive, but that doesn't keep states, even though they want to protect from outside invaders, that doesn't keep states from taking their own advantage and taxing as much as they can, regulating peaceful conduct when they or some constituency finds it advantageous to do that. And so you get the history of abuse, which you can easily read about by doing any serious study of political history in the world, or particularly the United States. So that's the reason we don't want to take the Hobbesian deal. It's also a false notion by Hobbes that that's the only way to have order, because we have many examples, and this has been written about in lots of places, of essentially stateless societies or stateless territories, even if not formally stateless, where there was a good deal of order, spontaneous order, because people, generally realize there's more to gain from by trading with people, cooperating with people, than plundering them.
Scott Horton, you've done quite a bit of work in the foreign policy arena. What has studying foreign policy taught you about the nature of the state and one group having a monopoly on violence?
Well, I mean, the same thing as everybody else can see right in front of their eyes, right? I'm lucky enough. I went to a private high school where I had an anarcho-communist history teacher. So starting in 10th grade, 11th grade, 12th grade, all 3 years there, I got to learn about central banking. I got to learn about CIA coups. I got to learn about, well, I don't know who coined this phrase originally, but this may have been C. Wright Mills, the permanent warfare economy, where essentially the American government stimulates manufacturing by pouring money into weapons for the Pentagon, and how essentially that was why Truman started the Cold War, because they had tooled up so much industry to support the warfare state for World War II. They just didn't want to go through the pain of the recession in armaments and figure out what else to make instead. They just wanted to keep shoveling that money in. And it, of course, also helps keep big business in line with the government's goals and vice versa and all that. It's a very symbiotic, ugly relationship, American fascism, you see. And anyway, so yeah, I mean, you know, when I was a kid, they were paying death squads that were going around hacking women and children to death with machetes down in El Salvador and Nicaragua. And they're having the Israelis sell missiles to the Ayatollah to use against their ally, Saddam Hussein, the mass murderer of the Kurds, at the same time, after he'd killed 300,000-400,000 people in the Anfal campaign with American weapons in the first place. I saw when I was a kid, I don't know when I first learned this, but it was young. It was certainly before Bill Clinton was ever inaugurated president. I knew that the Reagan and Bush government had brought in all the cocaine, had massively increased the supply. At the same time, they were massively increasing the war on drugs and the penalties, especially for, in California, poor black people using cocaine south of the 10 there. And you know, the LAPD went to the Marines to learn counterinsurgency, you know, to relearn counterinsurgency tactics, to go to war against these poor people. I knew all about that. And then, of course, Waco. I like to make the analogy about Iraq War II, that what was Iraq War II? It's Waco writ large. And look, the guy's crazy, so we can't deal with him. No point in sending anyone to negotiate. The local sheriff, not man enough to deal with this crazy lunatic. Colin Powell, the former 4-star general, Secretary of State, former chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, not tough enough to deal with crazy old Saddam. Too crazy to talk to. Also, bad to his own people. Oh, so bad. Did I ever tell you all the things David Koresh was supposedly doing to his followers and their children? Oh, yeah. And Saddam Hussein, well, that was true, except it was all when Reagan and Bush supported him, all the worst things he did to his own people. Oh, and when Bush Sr. encouraged an uprising against him and then betrayed them and sat back and watched Saddam murder them all in the great Bay of Pigs of the Desert in 1991. And then they said, when he's got illegal weapons, and that's against the laws, we're going to send an Army Delta Force in there to kill them all. But so if Iraq was Waco writ large, then Waco was Iraq writ small. But that was just a little plot of land out in northeast McClellan County out there, 100 miles from where I'm sitting right now, okay? So, you know, what did I learn about that? The state will kill you if they want to. And then they'll get on TV and tell the world that you killed yourself.
Yeah, really.
Set your kid on fire and tell the world that you poured gas on your own kid and set him on fire. And the people will love it and will buy it. That's how I learned. Yeah. And here we are, you know, everybody missing out. Did you know Glenn Beck last Friday, and I'm not picking on the guy. I don't know what the hell. Everybody's trying to get around in this world. Maybe he's sorry. But last Friday, he told Dave Smith, yeah, I was wrong about Iraq and the Patriot Act and all that. Oh, man. Okay, say you're sorry 1,000,000 times until you pass out, dude. It ain't fair that you just get to be wrong about it. Like, remember how wrong Glenn Beck was about the war on terrorism back when it counted? How wrong he and everyone who agreed with him, which was tens of millions of people, led by him and his colleagues, pushing that shit. And what they did, how they ruined the 21st century, Glenn Beck and his people. Like, how sorry do you have to be to make up for that, what they did? Because they couldn't learn the simple lesson of Waco, which is these pigs are barely human at all. You're going to give them your son to go and kill people, to start a war? Does that mean that the Japanese were right to attack us at Pearl Harbor because now attacking a country is no longer a dastardly thing to do? Or how does that work? And we've been at war for 20 years since, and it ain't over yet. You know, we keep talking about the war in Yemen, which may be wrapping up right now, the war for Al-Qaeda in Yemen. But then we still have to have a war against Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula from now on. That ain't over. There's still a war against Al-Qaeda linked Al-Shabaab in Somalia. It's been 21 years coming up on it. Longest war in American history. That's not over. We still got troops in Iraq and Syria, special operations forces all throughout Africa, while we're busy picking a fight in Eastern Europe and in the far Western Pacific Ocean. It's crazy. What I learned, I guess I learned that the government doesn't give a damn about us, while the American people conflate our society, our land, our people, our culture with our government. They don't conflate themselves with us at all.
Yeah,
They don't give
really.
a damn about us at all. That's what I learned.
Kyle Anzalone, one of the major stories everywhere you turn on the news is the war between Russia and Ukraine that I guess started in February of this year. Is that an accurate portrayal of events? Fill us in on what we need to know about Ukraine that NBC isn't telling us.
I mean, there's a lot, and I know Scott's working on a book about this, and so that's probably, the full tape. But just real quick, there has been a civil war going on in Ukraine since 2014, and that's pretty important to point out. 15,000 people have died, and no doubt there's been a lot of death in Ukraine over the past month. But if you're looking at what Russia is doing there, they are carrying out an invasion, but it is somewhat limited. They're not just trying to kill every last person. Even the Defense Intelligence Agency has admitted this. And so this is a response from Russia to the Western encroachment and NATO encroachment onto Russian borders. And rather than looking at the reality of the situation for NATO, I just wrote this one for antiwar.com yesterday, that they're planning a massive military buildup. They want to put a force in every single border state with Russia, the Baltic states, Poland, and I'm assuming that they're going to also push this in the Black Sea states like Romania, Slovakia, and Hungary too, where they want to put a NATO force in all these countries capable of preventing a Russian invasion. Now, they're going to claim, oh, this is just defensive, but Russia is going to look at this and say, well, you have a force capable of preventing an invasion in Latvia, Lithuania, and Estonia. That's also a very dangerous offensive capability that could roll across the border. And I don't think they're that far from St. Petersburg, really. Major Russian population centers are not that far from the Baltics. And so this is going to be seen as a huge threat from Russia. And we're only continuing down this same path that led to the war in Ukraine and could very well lead to more conflict.
Check out the Libertarian Institute. For every dollar you donate, it's going to be doubled. I know that is today. I'm not sure how much longer that will last, but you can come across brilliant quotes like this. George Kennan in 1997 warning, expanding NATO would be the most fateful error of American policy in the entire post-Cold War era. So the father of the containment policy is warning against expanding NATO, and the corporate press does not seem too interested in following up on this or interviewing people like Colonel Douglas McGregor. The Libertarian Institute is making sure you have the information. Patrick, what else? Give us an idea of what you're working on besides the China stuff. I know you and I have been going through Mises and Rothbard quotes. What else are you working on?
Well, I have a interview lined up with Lori Calhoun, who's a writer at the Libertarian Institute as well, and alongside with the China stuff, which has been my focus primarily for the last year, I guess I would say. I think that opposing the new Cold War with Russia and China is the most important thing we can do right now. But aside from that, I've also been taking a deep critical dive at the psychology behind killing in war, and the way that the U.S. military and other militaries around the world and throughout history have tried to deal with this problem. And the problem is that this is observable, that people do not want to kill other people. There's an innate resistance to killing that you can observe and has been documented over the years, that militaries actually have to force their soldiers to kill, that combat throughout history can be described as about 80%, maybe higher, of the soldiers actually actively avoiding killing the enemy. And I think that this touches into the whole morality of warfare itself. And Lori has done a great work in her book. I think it's called War and Delusion, where she talks about how the just war theory is just complete bunk. And I wanted to pick her brain because I know she's also done some work about the psychology of killing in combat. So that has been something I've kind of been focusing It's a little bit on the back shelf now with focusing on opposing the new Cold War with China, but I'm excited to talk to Lori about that.
And just a couple more things I want to go over while we're talking about this fundraiser that we have. Sheldon, you mentioned one of the topics that I thought was most interesting. It was first brought to my attention. It had to have been Harry Brown a number of years ago. This is the concept of when history begins. What should people know about reading headlines and discussing a date when history begins?
I did write an article about that a few weeks ago in connection with Ukraine, but you just see this over and over and over again. 9/11, you can go back. Look, most Americans aren't reading history, certainly not the history of war, foreign policy, things related to that. And so when some big headline event occurs, aided by the news media and the politicians, because of their interests involved, there's this impression left that things began the day before the big headline. Now with the 24-hour news and the internet and everything, it's the same day as the headline. You see the headline, maybe moments after something breaks. So, when Russia invaded Ukraine in February 24th, was it? Lots of people, even though there had been recent news and therefore recent history about it going back to 2014, but for a lot of people that's long forgotten if they were paying attention. Everybody wants to know, okay, explain beginning from February 24th why Putin or Russia has invaded Ukraine and what happens about it. Well, if you explain, you could go back to 2014 and look at the U.S. inspired coup, underwritten coup. And then they'll maybe go to the invasion of Crimea and say history began basically with respect to this on that date. And this happens over and over again. So our task, which is not easy, is because we got to get people's attention, is to say, wait a second, it does go back further, and you're going to need a little bit of patience to hear the story, whether it's in a short article or a book, and lots of people just don't read books, but that's the problem. Getting people to focus on not the day that the big headline broke and the latest big thing happened, but all these things always have history. They always exist in a context. Things like this don't happen out of the blue. I mean, not out of the blue is kind of the 9/11 attitude of most people, right? Just one day we've been minding our own business, and one day some guys decided to fly planes into the towers and hit the Pentagon and so on. And all of us who were involved back then know how difficult it was even to get friends and relatives to realize that we weren't just minding our own business and this was out of the blue, which is not to justify the actions taken by those 19 people and the people backing them on 9/11. But you can't understand things at all if you're only going to start with the one act. So that's what that means.
Excellent points. And then finally, we have the concept of narratives or prevailing interpretations of past events that really stick in people's minds. So it's really hard for us to imagine the pain and suffering that King Leopold inflicted on the Congo, those millions of people. But seeing the 9/11 video is so heart-wrenching that those 3,000 lives will be remembered in so much more detail than numerous other lives that were not caught on video. So when it comes to creating narratives, one of the big ones is the Oklahoma City bombing. Scott Horton, what can people learn from this Libertarian Institute Ultimate Oklahoma City Bombing Archive?
Well, they can learn a hell of a lot of facts, and they can learn what all the most important questions are. And to sum it up, a bunch of neo-Nazis helped McVeigh do that attack, and many of them were undercover informants or flip states witnesses. At least one, possibly two of them, were acting as government agent provocateurs to provoke that attack. Whether they really meant for it to be successful or not is a separate question. The complicity of the cops and their failure to stop it and all that, remains open to interpretation. And then the cover-up is legendary. There's side issues such as the murder of this poor guy, Kenneth Trenadu, in what is quite apparently a case of mistaken identity. The cops thought they were murdering a guy named Richard Guthrie, who very likely was John Doe number 2, and who later killed himself in his prison cell, just like they claimed happened to Trinidad. But his brother Jesse found out the truth about all of that, and has been suing in court in Utah ever since. And there's at libertarianinstitute.org/OKC, people can find my entire treasure trove of archives, which I've been saving up for years here, trying to do documents and the rest. But I just turned all that over to Richard Booth, this brilliant researcher and journalist and author on this issue, who has added, my collection of documents and audio clips and whatever else it all is up there to his absolute treasure trove. Like, he just has everything. I bet what I gave him is probably 10% of what's up there. He has so much stuff. All of the best news articles, all of the documents, Secret Service, ATF, FBI, all the 302s, all the court records and transcripts and evidence, exhibits and whatever in the world you could think of. He's got it all there at libertarianinstitute.org/OKC. And by the way, there's none of the kooky stuff. There's nothing about, Iraq did it, like the neocons tried to spin it. And, nothing like that. It's all reliable, verifiable journalism, not kookery, even though possibly that sounds like a kookery type subject matter to people. I assure you it ain't. In fact, anyway, go see for yourself. And, I'll tell you this. Booth is working on a book. I can't promise it'll be this year because he's got a real job and, is doing his best. I think he was going to try to write something like the encyclopedia of everything you need to know about this. And I think he narrowed it down sort of, I think Fool's Errand was chapter 2 of Enough Already that kind of got out of control and became its own book. I think that's what he's doing. I think he's doing the Fool's Errand of the Oklahoma bombing rather than the Enough Already of it, if that makes sense. Which is fine by me. Whatever narrow point, however narrow or broad it is that he's trying to make, I'm happy to be associated with that and to publish that and to host all of his research and all of his great work on this. If I had a couple of clones like that Halloween episode of The Simpsons, and I could just spit out a few more versions of me, I would have one of me who's dedicated full time to this story, but I just can't do it. So I'm just so happy that he is essentially, taking up that cudgel for us all. And it's just unfortunate. I mean, hell, Roger Charles just died. And, time's moving on. A lot of witnesses have died. And the trails are growing cold. And here we got this young, energetic young guy who's from Oklahoma City and just grew up knowing they were lying about this his whole life and is determined to get to the bottom of it all for us. So we're just lucky as hell to have him and to be associated with him and to have his great archive at our site. And I look forward to publishing his book whenever it's ready.
Another podcaster, we have Tommy Salmons in his Year Zero podcast. I had the pleasure of being on his show. We refute the myth that private enterprise is a group of people constantly in search of smaller and smaller government. I was happy to be on with a gentleman named Ace Archist. Kyle, tell us about Connor Freeman and Will. Jesus, I'm blanking on
Will
Will
Porter. Yeah,
Will Porter. I almost said Will Gregg. Fill us in on those gentlemen.
Yeah, I mean Connor and Will are my guys. They're the absolute best. Connor is a little bit newer to the scene. He is writing some opinion pieces. He's trying to get out one a week for us at the Institute and has been pretty close to that schedule recently. Everything he writes is fantastic. He's very punchy. He doesn't hold back. He's going to call out every single warmonger every single time. He's dedicated to the libertarian and anti-war position, and he's absolutely fantastic. He knows what me and Scott know about foreign policy, and it just utilizes all that information in his writing. And now as a co-host appears weekly with me on conflicts of interest. Will and me have been doing podcasting together for 4 or 5 years now. well over 100 joint shows. And we haven't been doing shows together recently, but we have been doing a lot of writing together recently and trying to really put together a news page for the Libertarian Institute. Will's written over 3,000 articles, like news articles, in the past like 4 or 5 years now. So this guy knows it. Like he whenever we get a story, he's instantly going to all like the original sources, every single government. He knows like their Ministry of, Foreign Affairs and Defense and everything like that. And he's finding all the statements so we could, be sure to put in there all the information you need, but also we don't, spin it like CNN and just give the truncated narrative and things like that. We put in the background information. And so I'm so fortunate to be able to work with both of those guys. And, me and Will, I think we put out over 60 news articles last month in the news section. And so I think we're on pace to do about the same this next month. And yeah, just trying to cover everything we can from the, anti-war libertarian perspective.
Excellent work. Patrick McFarland, final words and something the Libertarian Institute provides you think people will find a lot of value in.
Yeah, well, final words. I'm really excited about the work that we're doing, and I think that we're really breaking through at the Institute, and I hope people feel the same way. I think that what we can provide is a pure libertarian take on all of these things that are going on, and I think that we provide, I hope, being right at the right time, and I think that's crucial. So we've talked a lot about being right at the right time in this show, at least in an ancillary way, and I think that that's what we strive to provide here at the Libertarian Institute, is the quintessential libertarian take on these things that are going on. So we really look for your support to help us do that. And we appreciate everything that we can get and people consuming the content.
Sheldon Richmond, what is something that people can find at the Libertarian Institute, and your final words?
The news roundup is, of course, worth its weight in gold, which is kind of funny because I guess it doesn't literally weigh anything, but it's very valuable. It'll save you a lot of searching around, and you're going to find stuff that's going to be hard to find. The book selection, it's just hard to overstate how great that is. And Scott's book, Enough Already, it's like an encyclopedia, except with much more detail than encyclopedias have, because it just covers every aspect of the war on terror going back, before 2001. And it's just great as a reference book. I mean, if you you don't have the time to read it cover to cover, keep it on your shelf or have it on your Kindle, and you can look up a particular topic. Anytime you're curious about it, you're going to get plenty of detail and plenty of references. And then just the opinion articles, the analytical articles that are there every day, original, but also reposts from other places. Saves you a lot of searching to the other sites. I can't, and it's inspiring. Look at this team that Scott has put together. These younger guys are inspiring to me as someone already involved. It's like new energy, because when I hear these guys talking about what they're up to, it's just fabulous.
Can you imagine decades or even centuries ago getting to allocate money to the freedom fighters of the world when there's no internet? You just got to cross your fingers and hope Thomas Paine and Ludwig von Mises get picked up and published. But now at the tip of your fingers, not only can you donate, you can get an excellent copy of one of our books, and your funds are doubled, and it's a tax write-off. Scott Horton, final words and something that the Libertarian Institute provides that people will find value in.
Yeah, well, I mean, I hope we're good on things. I think people will find that we are. I got to say, I'm so proud of all of you guys, and the fact that you guys are willing to work with me on this project in this way and whatever. What the only thing Kyle didn't mention about Will Porter and Connor Freeman there is that I brought them on full time now. They're part of the crew now with us, and I guess we've now made Patrick as the Justin Raimondo Fellow, which is really great. And we need to come up with better titles for Will and Connor. But we also have, I mean, what can you say, dude? We have the legend Jim Bovard as a regular contributor to our site, along with, you mentioned Lori Calhoun there, Patrick, and her great work on killing and all of that. Well, Lori Calhoun is one of the most brilliant writers in the libertarian movement you could find anywhere. She's like the Will Grigg of our current era now. I mean, she's just absolutely incredible. Her book, We Kill Because We Can, is, foundational. It's as important as anything I ever wrote, much more probably. And she's certainly a much deeper thinker than I am. I'm just a names and dates guy. I'm a outrage a page guy, but she's got real deep thinking skills that are just on display on our page all damn day. That's enough right there. And Bovard, of course, is one of the most prolific journalists and writers and opinionists in libertarian history. He's written like 15 books or something like that. He's working on something right now. I don't know exactly what, but I can't wait for it. He's a big shot. He writes for the New York Post, Wall Street Journal, USA Today. He's on the board of USA Today, and he's a regular contributor to the Libertarian Institute as well. I'm very proud of that. And, Kim Robinson, I want to name some other names, but I'm kind of mad at them for not writing for us for a little while, so I'm going to withhold their names. But Kim Robinson is, we've been counting on him to churn out great stuff for us for years now. And he's an MMA fighter and trainer from Australia and a real badass. And like Lori, a very deep thinker. He writes these incredible essays about, essentially war and peace and the ideologies behind them and the consequences of it all and history and all this. He's just brilliant. I mean, I'm not sure what I did to deserve having you guys agree to come and pal around with me, but I'm pretty impressed. I hope that people feel the same way about this project that I do, and that I think that you guys do. So and I'm just as grateful as I am proud about all of that. Now, also, I got some announcements here, which, is it okay if I say, Keith? I'm going to say it. Keith Knight is putting out a book very soon, and I sent it off to the guy, and it's for the very, very final stages of production here. So very soon we are going to be publishing. I won't describe it. I'll just tell you Keith Knight has a book. I'll leave the rest to him there. And then I've got a book that's almost done. That's a collection of interviews that I did about nuclear weapons. Hiroshima, Nagasaki, Iran's nuclear program, America's Minutemen missiles, and Russia's retaliatory capability, and all of the rest of it, everything in there that you need to know about nukes. And I don't want to tell you the title yet because someone will copyright it before I get a chance to get my barcode set. I know how y'all are with your copyrights, but I'm going to be putting that out, and it's going to be very soon, and it's going to be great. And also, I am working on a book about the war, as you mentioned previously. I'm working on a book about the lead up to the war, America's role, the West's role in provoking the war between Russia and Ukraine. That's going on right now. It's based on the speech I gave 2 years ago in February 2020 to the Libertarian Party of Washington State there in King County. Maybe it was just the King County chapter. And then I expanded that for the speech I gave in Utah a couple of months ago. And then now it's already more than double in length. And the real great news, and this is the first time I publicly announced this, so I hope that you guys find this as exciting as I do, is that I brought on as my co-author Daryl Cooper, aka Martyr Made on Twitter, who is the host of the Martyr Made podcast and co-host of the Unraveling podcast with Jocko Willink. And he's my buddy and a great anti-war guy. And he's the one who had me out and got me on the Jocko Willink show there back a few weeks ago. And he just put out this podcast that was so damn good on Ukraine. And I thought it just perfectly complemented what I already wrote. I just wanted to plagiarize it and copy and paste a bunch of pieces of it into the book. So that's exactly what I'm doing. That's exactly what I've already done, is copied and pasted a bunch of his stuff into my, chocolate and peanut butter mixed together here. And then, of course, we're both reading a pile of books and taking a million notes and working on putting together the rest of this thing. And we're in a real hurry. So not exactly sure how long it's going to take, but I got a great co-author here, really brilliant guy. So that's coming out real soon. And then also William Van Wagenen is working on a collection. You guys know him as one of the most just absolutely thorough and just scholarly and incredible American writers on the war in Syria. And his series that he has done for us at the Libertarian Institute is, stands on its own. The only thing that's left to be done is to edit out the redundancies and put it together correctly in book form. But essentially each essay already is a 15 or 20,000 word chapter or something, right? They're already complete chapters. And his essays for us are just absolutely incredible. It's William Van Wagenen, and he is working on putting all of that stuff together for us. And of course, there's my great friend Brad Hoff, who is a former Marine who lived in Syria for a while and was a great commentator on the Syrian war, kept the blog Levant Report, and he's already put out a book called Syria Crucified with his co-author is Zachary I'm going to say it wrong. Wingard. See, I was going to say it wrong. Zachary Wingard. Now, they put this book on as the stories of all these Christians who were persecuted and lost everything at the hands of the CIA's and Allied-backed Al-Qaeda forces in the dirty war in Syria, and the consequences for the Christian population there. And which I admit I haven't finished yet, or I would have had Brad and his co-author on about it for 2 hours probably already. But it's on the pile. But the thing is, they're working on another one, and they're going to put out a book about the war on Syria, not to give too much away, but based on a lot of secret documents and sort of the hidden history behind America's agenda against Syria going back for many decades. And this is a guy who's got his act together. He's the guy that, I guess it was originally Judicial Watch that turned up the document, but he's the one who wrote up and publicized the DIA document of 2012 that was written by Michael Flynn's guys that warned that we're creating an Islamic caliphate in eastern Syria, and there's a danger it could blow back into Iraq. And that, the Islamic State of Iraq, they do call themselves the Islamic State, so it ain't like a secret what they want. That was Brad that brought that great information to us then. And who am I missing here? I mentioned Richard Booth, and then there's this guy John Weeks, who I don't know if you guys know him yet. I don't think you do. He's not much of a public figure at this point, but I know him, and he's a great libertarian, and I've already made a handshake deal with him that I'm going to be happy to publish his book that he's working on, that's really about the philosophy and the mindset and the ideology of American militarism among the population and the elite and all the rest. Real smart guy stuff that, I'm perfectly incapable of writing, more Laurie Calhoun level deep thinking stuff on all of these issues. So I'm really proud of that. And John is a great guy, a brilliant guy. So I don't know exactly when that thing's going to be done. I know he's getting cracking on it right now. And so, that's going to really be, you think our podcasts and articles are awesome. The catalog of books on the Libertarian Institute shelf, this time next year should be enough to just knock anybody's socks off there. So I'm real proud. And look, we're never going to have Charles Koch money. You're never going to have a glass castle in Washington, D.C. And frankly, we're never going to be as huge and important as the Mises Institute and all that they have accomplished over the last 40 years. I mean, they're just absolute legends, and toast to them. But if we can be equal peers with FFF and FEE and the Independent Institute and be on that same level with them and be considered to be, one of the group of important libertarian institutions on that level, then I'd be proud of that. And I already believe that that's the case, but it's pretty hard for me to tell from here. But I think that's what we're doing. I know we have some dedicated fans out there. I've been doing a lot of traveling around, mostly for the Libertarian Party, for the Mises Caucus, giving speeches to the Libertarian Party state conventions about anti-war issues and things. And we have some diehard fans out there in the country, guys. And literally, I mean, for the last, 10 or 12 weekends in a row, I've traveled across this country. So I've really been to a lot of states. And in the last 2-3 years, I couldn't tell you which all states I've been to. I met a lot of people out there, and they really do care about what we're doing. Certainly enough for us to keep going. So, and for you Bitcoin millionaires, you can help make up for those of us who had to spend our Bitcoins on rent when they were only worth $12 each, and keep our institute going. And we appreciate it. I appreciate all you guys on the team. I appreciate all of our readers and listeners and supporters, and just what can I say but thank you.
Check us out at libertarianinstitute.org. I have 764 ad-free videos you can check out. Summaries of Scott Horton's work on Russia here. This Karlin Borisenko, why she left the Democrats and joined the Libertarians. Great story. I'm trying to bring over the red pill community with getting Rollo Tomasi fans over. Shepard, the voluntarist. He was formerly a cop, then wrote a book on why everyone should be a voluntarist. We have a blog. So if you like reading, but not too much, podcasts if you like listening, archives if you're really into reading. We have the books. We have everything there. Gentlemen, thank you so much for your time, and thanks to the viewers who are watching the Libertarian Institute Odyssey and YouTube channel. Take care, everyone.